Many people will tell me that planning for the end of life is morbid or depressing. And if that's you, I can't blame you. If you would much rather skip this episode, I get it. But hear me out. Getting your affairs in order while you are healthy and mentally fit is a really beautiful way to look out for your loved ones. Honestly, it's the opposite of morbid. Once you have your affairs in order, you can completely relax. You don't need to worry about the what-ifs because you've taken care of them, so stick with me here. It's such a deep kind of peace, knowing that if anything ever happens and you ended up so terminally ill that you couldn't speak for yourself, your loved ones won't have to guess, stress, or argue, because you've already made it clear what you want in a situation like this. That's love in fiction. In today's episode of the Doula Johanna podcast, we're starting with one of the most important end-of-life essentials. In Germany, where I live, it is called your Patientenverfügung. If you're watching this from the US, this would be called an advance directive, and in the UK, it's often referred to as an advance decision or living will. And what it does is really simple. It lets doctors and your family know what kind of medical treatment you would or wouldn't want if you ever couldn't speak for yourself. I learned about this as a young woman from my uncle, who unfortunately passed away in his early 50s from lung cancer. He was a male nurse and therefore knew very well how painful it can be for families when they don't know what their loved one would have wanted. Imagine having to decide whether to continue life support for your partner or your parent without knowing if that's what they wanted. It's heartbreaking, and it is also totally overwhelming. Your loved ones will most likely feel obligated to prolong your life, no matter how slim or unrealistic the chance of recovery is. The gift of a living will is that you take that impossible burden away from them. That's what my uncle did for us. He knew exactly what he wanted and what he didn't want. He wanted to donate his body to science, for example. He did not want reanimation and no feeding tube. And when it was his time to die, we were so grateful that even though he wasn't able to speak for himself anymore, we knew what his wishes were for those last days. I totally admit that this is not a fun task to answer those questions. It is really rough to imagine yourself or a loved one in those desperate situations. But you really only have to do it once, with the option to change your mind later, anytime. Before we go deeper into the topic of what questions will be asked of you, I want to clear up one really common fear. When people hear about a living will, they often think it means, if I ever have an accident, the doctors won't save me. That's absolutely not what this is about. If you get into a car crash or if you're injured and there's a chance of recovery, of course you'll receive all possible life-saving treatments. The living will only becomes relevant if doctors have done everything they can and you're left in a terminally ill or irreversible state, when there is no realistic chance of getting back to a conscious or self-determined life. So this is not a do not resuscitate form for emergencies. It is a manual for the very end, for those situations where medicine could prolong your life but not restore living. And that's where these questions come in. You're basically telling your doctors and your family, if that day ever comes, this is what I would want. The form will ask you to imagine certain situations. For example, that you're in the final stage of an incurable illness, or you're permanently unconscious after a severe brain injury, or you have advanced dementia and you no longer recognize your loved ones. And then it asks you to think about different medical measures one by one and what you would want if you were in one of those states. For example, do you want to be kept alive through artificial ventilation, which means being attached to a breathing machine, even if recovery isn't possible? Or do you want artificial nutrition or hydration through a feeding tube? Or would you prefer natural comfort care only? Should doctors attempt resuscitation if your heart stops in a situation where you're already terminally ill? And do you still want dialysis if your kidneys fail? Should infections be treated with antibiotics, for example, or would you rather focus on pain relief only? And speaking of pain, most people say that they want strong medication, even if it might shorten their life a little, because comfort and dignity matter more than a few extra days or weeks. This could be different for you, right? Like there is no right or wrong at all with this form. It's the opposite. Because we are all so different and because we have a different focus, different religious backgrounds and all of those things, it's so important to actually fill that out, because even for the people really close to you, it might be hard to answer. Especially because they might have their own agenda, right? They would say like, no, I don't want to lose you. I want to keep you around for as long as possible, even if there's no chance for you to recover. This is so hard for family members to decide. Therefore, you can also add things that matter to you personally. For instance, I would want music around. I don't want to be moved to intensive care if it only prolongs dying. Or I would want my family to be near me. Every person's answer is different, and there is no right or wrong. What's important is that you take a moment to ask yourself, what does a good life and a good death mean to me? Speaking of a good life, as you are still here, you think about this question, what a good life really looks like. And you are not afraid to admit that life and death go hand in hand. So I want to invite you to my 42nd birthday. It's on December 28th, and what I do on my birthday every year is setting intentions for the new year to avoid looking back one day full of regrets. This year, I don't want to do it alone. I want to invite you to join me for a 3-hour session called No Regrets, an Intention Setting Party. Click on the link in the description to join. As we established, a good life means very different things to different people. For some, dignity means being conscious and able to communicate. For others, it simply means being at peace without pain. Writing that down gives doctors something that they can actually follow, and it spares your loved ones from having to guess or argue. I've heard this from way too many friends who had to make these decisions for their loved ones. When there's no written will, families often carry the guilt for years, wondering if they made the right choices. So you really don't fill this out to give up on life. You fill it out because you respect life and you respect your loved ones. You want your end to reflect your values, your boundaries, and your love for the people who'll be standing beside you. And the good news is, it's really not that complicated. Here's how to do it. You can download free official forms by clicking on the links that I will put in the description for different countries. You fill it in, sign, and date it. No lawyer needed, at least in most countries. Then you can give copies to your partner, your doctors, or maybe your adult children, whoever you choose to represent you in those situations. You can maybe keep one in your important documents folder and maybe upload a digital copy somewhere safe. And once you are done filling it out for yourself, get your parents and your partner to do it. Maybe you can make an evening out of it, be each other's witnesses, and create a lasting memory. Sometimes when you think about those questions for the first time, a lot of feelings might come up, right? Like it's so uncomfortable to imagine yourself in a situation like this. And it's also sometimes hard to understand, what would that mean? What are my choices? And it's nice to do that with a group of people, help each other out, Google things together, ask ChatGPT, and have a conversation about it, because sometimes it's so much more nuanced than those questions can actually be. So you can put personal notes in there. You really can create a beautiful memory from that, where you look out for each other. I know that this isn't the easiest topic, but it's one of the kindest things you can do. Planning ahead doesn't take away from life. It actually gives you back your peace of mind. So if you love them, write this down. This was only part 1 of this End of Life Essential series. In the next episode, we'll talk about the power of attorney, who will speak for you when you can't. Not only in medical matters, but who can represent you in all other areas of life. If you want to learn step by step how to take care of your loved ones, even when you're gone, you can find a full series on my channel. May you have a beautiful day, and may you sprinkle a little bit of magic dust on the beautiful world around you.